Hi guys. My name is Evelyn, and I'd like to welcome you to our show. This is Mind to Mind, and I'm Evelyn Jerry. I am a mental health practitioner, and I'm joined by Dr. Claiborne. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Dan Claiborne. Yeah, I'm from the middle of the United States, where it's just beginning to be spring. Um, and this is our third program. Uh,
Yeah.
we're very anxious to keep going. It's every other week, every other Wednesday. Our first program, Evelyn and I introduced ourselves and teased each other, which we do quite often. And the last program, we began to discuss signs of mental health, what mental health looks like when people have it. And we're going to continue that today. Um, so, how are you, Evelyn?
I'm well, and I am so grateful to be alive. I am fine, and yeah.
Hmm.
So I think that's all I can say for now. I'm well, and I think when I like from where I'm standing, I think I'm mentally healthy, and it has taken a lot of work, so I feel good about that.
Yes, we have such a fun relationship. I think being mentally healthy is kind of, I think of it as aspirational. In other words, it's something we're always working toward, that we
Yeah.
never completely achieve it in every respect, for sure.
Mhm.
But And just before we started, Evelyn was mentioning how each person at their age sometimes thinks that that's the most important age, and we don't imagine what it's going to be like when we're much older. And so, one of the things I like about our conversations is that we're really also from different, not just different continents or
Mhm.
cultural backgrounds, but also different generations. And so,
Mhm.
that I'll bring a certain perspective, but Evelyn will bring her own perspective too. You're about what, 13 years old? Isn't that right, Evelyn?
Really? That I don't know. Like if you said 16, it will have been a compliment.
Oh, I
13
see. Oh, I
means
see.
I'm really young. But yeah, I am 30 years old
Hmm.
and I recently turned 30 in January and I'm feeling, I don't know, I'm feeling like an adult.
Well, good. Yeah, that's good. I would say you are. The only difficult birthday I ever had was 35, and I don't
Why?
know. I don't know why. It was maybe it was half of 70, or
What was going through your mind?
I don't know. I can't remember. I just remember I didn't like that birthday for some reason. But
But
that
you know, in Kenya, 35 means I don't know whether this applies to the rest of the world, but in Kenya, the moment you hit 35, you're no longer a youth. You're singing, I don't know, you're no longer a young adult. Like the youth in Kenya are 35 and below. So
oh,
it means
okay.
like it's your last year as a youth, and it means
I
like you're
see.
entering your
I
late
think
30s.
that's probably kind of accurate in a way, because I know at least in the United States, and in men especially, mature
Mhm.
slower and probably aren't really adult like until they're in their 30s, whereas some women really are mature by 25. But
Yeah.
men seem to take a little bit longer. Um, anyway, I'm teasing you. But, well, should we dive into signs of mental health?
I just realized something. You didn't tell us your age. It's so unfair that
Oh,
I
yes,
man will share
seven,
yours.
I'm 75. So I've achieved three-quarters of a century. I was,
Wow.
I was born in the first half of the 20th century, uh,
Wow.
1947, which was, I'm sure everyone will remember that as a very important year.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so I don't feel old, though. That's an interesting thing.
You don't even sound old.
No,
I think it's important like for us to share our age so that people can know like
sure.
there's a whole generational gap between us, and the fact that we relate so well and we're able to come up with so many aspects of life. Like I will speak more on what is going on in my generation right now, and then you
Yeah,
have years
yeah.
and years of wisdom that we can share
Hmm.
together, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, no, I really value that
Yeah.
a lot. Well, in our last program, and we had to skip a Wednesday, but so it's been a little longer than usual. So it'll usually be every other Wednesday. But we started off with a few basic things about mental health. And then today we thought we'd go into it a little further. The ones we covered last time were, as signs of mental health, were uh, feeling content with oneself,
Mhm.
having a sense of meaning and purpose in life,
Yeah.
having an ability to empathize and bond with other people,
Mhm.
being able to do rational decision making, being realistic about making our decisions,
Yeah.
um, accepting reality. Doesn't mean we don't try to change things, but we accept things, and particularly things that we can't change. We have a sense of social responsibility to others. And then this is also very important. Maybe this is what people think of when they think of mental health, but mental health would also imply not having cognitive or emotional disorders. And we'll have some programs on specific disorders as we go along, like depression and anxiety, and maybe eating disorders or schizophrenia or whatever. And some of that could be guided by our listeners, our viewers, what things you might all be interested in. We can tailor our future programs to requests that you, as our audience, things that you might want to hear us cover. So, anyway, so those are some of the things we covered last time. And this time, we thought we would just talk about, just more in detail, about what mentally healthy individuals experience. And the first one I noted on my list was, and this goes back thousands of years from all the philosophers who've talked about balance and moderation in life. So mentally healthy people have a balance between looking out for their own interests on the one hand, and then looking out for the interests of their family and friends and their community on the other hand. So
Yeah.
if we get too far in either direction, then we neglect the other part. So we're a part of a community and a family, but we also look out and we are in charge of our own decisions. So
Yeah.
does that make sense to you, Evelyn?
Yeah, it does because I don't know, for some years back, I used to fall more into the people pleasing side. Like
Yes.
I cared
Yes.
more of what people thought of me and what they want, what they need,
Right.
and I neglected my own needs. And I used to feel guilty for like following a dream or following something that I needed until I
Uh-huh.
realized it's not even mentally healthy. I I am very empathetic. I think I shared this like before. I'm very empathetic, so I tend to carry a lot of weight, like other people's weight, and
Hmm.
to an extent where I forget myself, and
Uh-huh.
I didn't realize how much it had costed me until I was 27.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I realized that I had people in my life who felt entitled to me putting their needs first, and I had such unhealthy relationships which I had to cut off, and it was very painful. But at the end of the day, like I feel like by last year when I was 29, I felt at peace with myself and where I am at, especially when I think I started pursuing my own goals and dreams
Uh-huh.
around 28,
Hmm.
and I stopped feeling guilty. And I realized I'm happier, I'm okay, I'm contented, but I still did not stop like caring for the people that I love.
Right. So more balance. And I think you mentioned something very important that really ultimately what we're striving for is that sense of peace and contentment.
Yeah,
Sometimes we think about striving for happiness, but really happiness comes once in a while. And but what is more attainable really is contentment and peace and
yeah,
satisfaction.
yeah,
Um, there's another aspect of excuse me, having balance between your own interests and the interests of others around you, and that's gender. In the United States, and it might be true in Kenya too, boys and men are more likely to overemphasize their own interests as they grow up,
hmm,
and girls and women are more likely to emphasize the needs of others as they grow up. And so we each then try to achieve our balance, as you know, by recognizing the other side as we
yeah,
mature. The
yeah,
next one is people who are mentally healthy are generally humble and grateful for the good fortune that they have. It don't feel as much as though they deserve it, but they're just more grateful and feeling lucky for the things that they have that are good.
yeah,
Um, I just find that this is something that I still focus on a lot, even as I'm older. Looking back, everybody has had problems and issues and challenges, but in other ways, we're all fortunate. We're all lucky in some fashion, whether it's our family or the community we're born into, or the body that we end up having, or our intellectual abilities or musical abilities, or we all have certain things that are lucky and fortunate. And mentally healthy people tend to reflect on that frequently, as
yeah.
opposed to feeling cheated or focusing on what they don't have.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. You just reminded me of something a friend of mine said. They said, okay, I work in the entertainment industry, and it's quite tough here in Kenya. Like if you're working, if you're a working artist, because you need a lot of self-esteem, because a lot of people will not support you.
Right.
Even your family and friends, they will take a while before they believe in your goal. It looks like a lost cause until you start showing signs of progressing.
Hmm.
And this friend of mine said that you have to have a whole um you see all uh there are these trucks that carry a lot of uh load. You need to have like such a load of self-esteem to be able to survive
Hmm.
in the in the entertainment industry here in Kenya.
Hmm.
And they were saying that you need to keep giving yourself positive reinforcements and affirmations. And I was wondering what's the difference between positive reinforcement and affirmations, and pride, because sometimes it kind of sounds similar. Like when you keep saying like, "Oh, I'm the bomb. I can do this. I can do this,"
Hmm.
and then there's also like saying that people cannot. This couldn't have succeeded without me. Like
Hmm. I think
there's
of
a thin
this.
line.
What you're asking is a really good question, and I
Yeah.
think I just as you were talking, I was thinking about you could look at this as almost like cooking. So if
Mhm.
you're cooking something, and let's say you're cooking self affirmation, you want to stir in a little bit of make sure you stir in enough reality. So when you're affirming yourself, you're affirming yourself realistically, not overly, not
Yeah.
imaginatively. On the other hand, if you're cooking pride, you want to make sure you stir in a little bit of humility, so that you have a modest amount of pride. That's good. Too much though, then the soup doesn't taste good. And so
Yeah.
it's, some of these mental health ingredients are like cooking something, and you want them to be balanced and
Hmm.
flavorful, but not extreme. That's
Mm-hmm.
and actually this goes back to the ancient Greeks, the idea of moderation.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of religions and cultures have stressed humility and moderation, but
Mm-hmm.
to a certain degree, self-affirmation and taking pride in what you've accomplished is natural and keeps you going. It energizes you. Um,
Yeah.
Another thing I mentioned, I looked on our list was, and these things all relate to each other. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Mentally healthy people avoid talking to themselves in an unhealthy way, and like we call it unhealthy self-talk. And one example would be saying to yourself, "This isn't fair. Something isn't fair." And or another example would be to say to yourself, "I can't stand this. I can't handle this." These are statements that are not true, because
Mm-hmm.
first of all, life isn't fair. There is nothing in the world is really meant to be fair. When fairness happens, it's good. We really appreciate it and we benefit from it. But it isn't a given that life will be fair. And
Yeah.
secondly, the comments like "I can't stand this" or "I can't handle this" are really not true. We can handle and stand a lot. And there are other negative things that sometimes we hear ourselves saying that actually inhibit us doing our best. Does that make
Mm.
sense? I mean,
Yeah,
I,
it makes a lot of sense because I was just watching a small clip from Dr. Phil the other day, and he was talking to a young girl who was doing like I think she engaged in an early relationship which was really toxic,
oh,
and the mom is the one who took her to the Dr. Phil. And one thing that strikes me was he told her to list down five positive things about herself, and she took her time to actually think about all these things. And when she was asked to list down um like things she thought about when she like when the guy had broke her,
hmm
she didn't have a problem like listing down all the negative things she thought about
uh,
herself, and the
yes,
reason as to why the guy left. Maybe she wasn't pretty enough, maybe she I don't know, like she had a whole list, and she never had trouble talking about herself negatively. And
yes,
he pointed out, like, did you realize that you have negative self-talk on speed dial, but when I asked you something nice about you, you had to take like a whole 2 minutes to think about one point, another point.
hmm
And it should be the other way around. Like, you should have positive things to say about yourself first
hmm
before you think about negative stuff. Because why is it that you don't believe that, for example, if I am heartbroken, why isn't it my first thought like, he lost someone that is faithful, he lost someone that is nice, he lost someone that is loyal? Like, it's not usually our first mindset. Like, our
hmm
first mindset is that, like, um I'm stupid. I shouldn't have done this, or I should have been more careful. I should have paid more attention. Like, you beating yourself up fast before thinking
uh-huh,
about all
right.
the good things you brought to the table.
One tricky aspect of this is that mentally healthy people generally do feel like much of what happens around them is under their control or their influence. And so when
Mhm.
something does go wrong, most of us in mentally healthy people think, well, what did I do? What could I have done?
Mhm.
Because we like to think that we have a certain amount of impact and power, but it can go too far, like what
Yeah.
you're saying, where we really focus almost entirely on what I did wrong or
Mhm.
something I should have done better. This is where talking to friends can really help, because if we
Yeah.
go to a friend and we tell them about this issue we're having, let's say a breaking up of a relationship or something, and here's how we feel about it. A lot of times our friends can see things a little more objectively, and they can
Yeah.
say, well, yes, maybe you did this or that, but then again, it's a lot of it is his decisions and what did he do. And sometimes really we can get a better perspective from talking to a friend about
Yeah.
something that's happened. um, this is also another one of those gender cases where sometimes, for example, in breakup, the male in the breakup may just think of, well, I'm such a great guy, this person just didn't deserve me. And meanwhile, the woman is thinking, what did I do wrong? So we
Yeah.
have to, each of us is socialized a little differently. Men are kind of socialized to strive and try to keep accomplishing and feel good about themselves and have kind of bravery and be reluctant to look at their shortcomings. And then
Yeah.
women are socialized to really, like we talked about earlier, pay attention to the needs of the other person. And gosh, if they're upset with me, I must have done something wrong myself.
Yeah.
One thing I've realized in all my years of just living is that if somebody you're in a relationship with of some sort, friendship or anything, and all of a sudden they back off or they do something, they don't return your phone call or they something puzzling, and it's almost always not your fault. It's something about them that they're
Yeah.
going through. There are a number
Yeah.
of times I've had this happen and I've wondered, why is that person distant? They used to be a closer friend. And then later on, sometimes I find out what happened, and it's not really me that they were
Yeah.
reacting to. It's something in their life. I've
But we
often
tend
seen
to
this.
think about we tend to think about ourselves in such situations, and especially like for example, like even a friendship or a relationship, if someone does something and you're hurt by it, we tend to think about our perspectives first instead of waiting to hear the other person's perspective. And maybe sometimes like you're caught up in the anger or the pain and the hurt, and you get blinded and you're not able to
Hmm.
wait until you can ask the person their perspective, or maybe they're not even in a position to explain
Hmm.
at that particular
Sure, it
point.
might be. Well,
Yeah.
one thing
Mhm.
we also kind of want it to be our fault in a certain way, because if
Yeah.
something is really something we did, we can fix it.
Yeah.
If it's
And
really nothing we did, then that's a little more of a helpless feeling. We can't
mhm,
repair it.
yeah, we tend to prefer to have answers, and sometimes like the answer is delayed. And for me, I one thing I've learned so far, and I think the past year, that's one thing I've learned, is that whenever I don't understand what's going on, I try and calm myself down first, and then I try to give the other person a benefit of a doubt. It's hard. It's really, really hard,
Hmm.
but I will try and distract my mind to not think in the worst of that person.
You
And
know,
I have really worked hard towards that
uh-huh.
until now I get to sit down, communicate how I'm feeling, and then the other person will tell me their parts. Sometimes you will find that the other person didn't even realize they hurt you. They
Yes, yeah.
didn't realize that was a problem in the first place. Or um they have a very different perspective to how they saw the whole situation,
Hmm,
and
sure.
it's not even about you.
What the part of what you just said, Evelyn, that I like the best is the
Uh-huh.
very first step. You calm yourself down.
Mhm.
That is so important. There's a new documentary that's on Netflix. Do you get Netflix in Kenya?
Yeah, we do.
There's a documentary, and it's a movie made by Jonah Hill, an actor, and it's
Mhm.
about his psychiatrist, and his name is Dr. Stutz, Stutz, and the
Mhm.
documentary is named Stutz. And
Mhm.
I very much recommend it. And one of the things he focuses on is what he calls your life force. And when you're in a situation that something's happened and it's out of your control and you don't know how to resolve it, that the one thing you can do is work on your own life force first, which is lot what like what you said, calming and centering yourself. He has three different layers of that. One, the first is physical, diet, exercise, and sleeping. The second one is people. So when we're in the midst of some kind of trauma, we tend to pull back and isolate ourselves, but we really should reach out and be around people more. And then the third level is paying attention to our relationship with ourselves. Remembering how grateful we are, remembering what our strengths are, things like
Mhm.
that. But all of those three things take, first of all, just like calming down. And so I really, that's the part of what you said I like the very best. And then the
It
rest
took a
comes.
while. It took a long while
Uh huh.
before I was able to do that. Because
Yeah.
sometimes I get, like, I remember I struggled with anger issues, like, I think in my early 20s.
Uh huh.
And I realized that if I can't control how I'm feeling, I will let myself cry. Like crying helps
Uh huh.
me calm down, and then from it will help me get my mind off the pain. Because sometimes you concentrate so much on how you're feeling,
Hmm.
and you give it so much power, but in the real sense, no one actually really hurt you.
So maybe what you're doing there is letting your emotions come out and
Yeah.
be expressed and felt. And then behind that, you can look at things more intellectually and,
That,
um,
yeah, because I have now I noticed if I react at that moment when I'm really angry, I will end up hurting the other person. And if they didn't hurt me in the first place, I will end up feeling guilty and ashamed. And that is worse than even being angry. So
mhm,
I will let myself process the emotion. Then afterwards, I will like let myself feel whatever I'm feeling, then process the emotion and also look at the scenario. And because sometimes like you will perceive the situation based on your own biases,
mhm, mhm.
and
I
maybe the
really like
person
that.
doesn't
Yeah.
understand your biases. So when I understand my own bias, I will be able to now look at it
Uh-huh.
realistically.
Hmm.
Then by the time now I'm communicating how I'm feeling to this other person, because I will not also ignore my feelings. When I
Uh-huh.
communicate my feelings to this other person, now they tell me their side, and I will be more sober minded to listen to them and listen to their perspective. And
Mhm.
then we will come out of that situation with a solved situation, because
Yeah.
sometimes we leave situations unsolved and it ends up hurting us even more. And then we are left thinking about our own perspectives, and they live with their own perspective. And then you end up losing a whole relationship because of that.
Uh-huh. I think that's
Mhm.
very well said. Okay. Some other characteristics of mentally healthy people. They can change their minds and opinions.
Mhm.
Um, they don't stereotype other people or groups of people as much. We can't help it a little bit, just because of the way we're raised, but
Yeah.
they recognize that certain people are toxic to us, and they try to avoid those people as much as possible. Not just people, but some situations too are
Mhm.
just not healthy for us, and so we try to limit our exposure to those situations.
Yeah.
Um, and then I'll mention one more, and we can talk about them. The healthy people also are aware of what their boundaries are and what their limits are, and they kind of protect them. So um, if I don't want to be abused in a certain way or mistreated or taken for granted, or I just know kind of what my limits are. Maybe I'll put up with a little bit of that, but not too much. And so healthy people allow themselves to leave situations or
Yeah.
relationships if they're toxic. And you kind of recognize that not every relationship will be good for us.
Yeah.
That took me a while when I was younger, I thought I can make everybody like me.
Yes.
And I can find something I like about everybody.
Yeah.
And I've noticed in my years as a therapist, there have been a few people that I got as therapy clients that I just couldn't find something I liked about them. And so therefore ethically I had to refer them to someone else,
Mhm.
because it's just kind of important to any relationship we have that we find something about the other person that we admire or like or feel comfortable with. And if not, life is short and we need sometimes to move on. Does that ring a bell
Yeah,
with you?
yeah. Um, there's this saying that goes around in Kenya. Like, okay, Kenyans are known for creating memes. I don't know whether you know what memes are.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's this I don't know if it's a meme or it's just a saying like we like to say like you're not ice cream, not everyone will like you.
Well, see, that's right.
And
That gets at the point.
yeah, and I don't know, I just thought about the fact that like have you ever is it normal? I just had this question. Is it normal that you walk into a room, complete strangers, and then you end up either someone will hate you out of the blues for no good reason, or you end up not liking someone and you don't know, you can't point it out. You can point out why you don't like that person. Is that normal?
Well, I think it's probably not frequent, but it definitely does happen. It's like a metaphor, like walking into a room. It could be like a job, or you're teaching a class and you don't, there are certain students that just turn you off or rub you the wrong way right from the beginning. Um,
Not necessarily like that person has done anything wrong to
mhm,
you. You
mhm.
just, I don't know whether it's an exchange of energy. Like, can we sense people's energy?
Mhm.
Because okay, like I've experienced that before. Like you go somewhere, maybe it's just a social gathering, and then afterwards you will, when you're in that room, you just find like this someone's energy will draw you in, and then other people's energy will draw you out, and you can't really point out why you don't really like this person. But the more I get to know the person, I tend to find that my energy is correct. Like I'll find that maybe there's something off about their character, personality, or something like that. I just
I think
now my
when
question
this
is
when
on.
this happens, I think it definitely does happen. And you, Evelyn, might, as a person, be more attuned to the energy of people than. I mean, some people are very attuned. Some people are not that attuned. So there's individual differences. But whenever it does happen, I think it is worth thinking later about why. It really something about that other person, or what was it that triggered my reaction? And maybe
Yeah,
you find out it's something more about yourself.
I think about that a lot because I don't find it okay for someone to just like not like you.
Hmm.
You know, like I will ask myself, is it something about them that triggered an insecurity that I do have about myself? Or is it that they reminded me of a situation that wasn't
Right,
pleasant in my
right.
life? Because sometimes you end up hating someone for the wrong reason, or maybe they end up paying
Mhm,
for a mistake that happened by someone else. And I don't think that is fair at all to the person or even yourself.
mhm. I would like to add one thing that I think is a little different, and that is if you're in a situation, and I'm speaking here a lot to women, but it's true of men too. If you're in a situation and you become, and even if though you can't understand why, but you become afraid, or something makes you feel very uneasy or fearful, you really need to respect that feeling. When I teach at police academies, and I teach young police officers, if you're in a situation, and maybe it's one that you've been in many times before, like stopping a traffic, making a traffic stop or something like that, but this time you feel very uneasy, or uh, ill at ease or on guard, to respect that feeling, because we all have a very ancient ability in our nervous system to sense danger. And the reason I address this to women in particular is because women, to a great extent, have been socialized to ignore that feeling, and don't upset people, but A very good book on this is called The Gift of Fear. And
Mhm.
it's like the book is about, it's written by a man who was a professional bodyguard to celebrities in Hollywood. And he's writing this about being in situations that make you uneasy and not ignoring those signals, but really respecting those signals and getting out of that situation as soon as you can. So, mostly what you're talking about, I think, is not fear, but just uneasy feelings about a person's personality or a type of person or whatever. And those are not so alarming. And you want to think later about what does that mean and how is that me or is that something about them? But if it's fear, though, in a certain situation, it's always okay to get out and
Yeah.
get away because your ancient nervous system might be picking up on something that really is true, that it really is dangerous. So I do
Yeah.
want to emphasize that it's okay.
Mhm. I
Let's
think
do.
that's really good advice.
Oh no, go ahead. Oh, I lost Evelyn's picture for a minute. Well, what I was going to go on to do is to mention a few more things that healthy people do. Um, Healthy people are careful about things that seem too good to be true. So if something you get into a situation like a relationship or whatever, and it's just too good to be true, it's okay to be skeptical and to question that and to take your time because sometimes things that are too good to be true are really not not good. Um, and I mentioned this earlier. Another characteristic of healthy people is if they're in a destructive or negative relationship, they give themselves permission to leave it. Um, and this is true of people or jobs, organizations, or habits or substances, things that we realize that we're doing them and they're not good for us. We give ourselves permission to stop. So that's another thing that's really important. One of my favorites that healthy people do is they ask for help when they need it. And I address this particularly to men because sometimes we men are socialized as we grow up uh, to not ask for help, not to seem as though we need help or assistance. And police officers that I work with are especially prone to this. But there are situations where all of us need help. And what I try to say to the young police officers is strong people use help. It's not that weak people use help, but one of the signs of a strong person is a willingness to ask for help, use resources. Okay. Um, Healthy people are aware of their own limits and what they can control. I mean, there are lots of things in life we can control. We have some input, and there are other things in life we really can't control. And so, knowing the difference and admitting to oneself, I don't think I can control this, whether it's a supervisor or um, one of our children, let's say, um, and realizing what our limits are. This is especially true if you're in a profession that is helping people, whether it's being a therapist or a doctor or whatever, or a police officer. You can do the best you can, but some people just can't take your help or they can't be helped. And it's just but important to be able to accept that. We don't have to like it, but I mean to accept that so that we don't wear ourselves out trying to help or change someone when it's not possible. Um, and then another one I'd like to mention is, and we mentioned this earlier too, is we all have areas we need to improve, but we also have areas that we're pretty good at and we need to appreciate. And so we mentioned this earlier, but we like to have a balance between congratulating ourselves and appreciating ourselves and what we're good at, but on the other hand, working to improve and change ourselves in productive ways too. Okay, kind of summarizing in terms of mental health, I had three things that I thought about. Um, One is, and this is something I thought about for a long time, I sometimes think of each of our lives as like a work of art. So we're born and we live a certain number of years, and every act we do in every day either adds to this work of art or detracts from it or strengthens it or weakens it. And then ultimately, the day we die, our work of art is finished, it's completed. And so every day we do the best we can. Sometimes we slide back, sometimes we make progress, but it's in it. Thinking of our life as not like a single person, but more like a performance. So I'm acting out a performance all of my life and making a work of art or telling a story. Maybe you think of it as um, telling a story. And then ultimately, at some point in time, and we don't know exactly when that time will be, the story or the performance ends, and then that's complete. And it is then what it is, what we've made of it. Another idea I have, and we mentioned this earlier too, but it's worth repeating, that healthy people really, happiness is nice. We want as happiness to happen as often as we can have it. But what we're really striving for that's more possible to attain is contentment or satisfaction, or Evelyn mentioned it earlier, a sense of peacefulness. Um, and these are not like things that are fair. We don't. A goal in life is not to achieve fairness or to feel like the rewards we obtain or we deserve them. Those are slippery slopes. When you get into what's fair and what do we deserve. For example, I'm happily married. Do I deserve my wife? Well, that's tricky. But do I feel fortunate to have my wife? Yes. So I think healthy people focus more on their good fortune rather than on what they deserve, and more on feeling content generally than being happy. And then the last point that I thought of in kind of summarizing is that mentally healthy people focus on making choices. They focus on giving love. They focus on achieving understanding of things that they previously didn't understand. They focus on improving something in the world and in themselves. They focus on being kind, and they focus on enjoying some interests and passions that they have as a person. And so, in each of these areas, making choices, giving love, achieving understanding, improving something, being kind, and enjoying my own personal interests and passions, we, 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 what I call, we live intentionally. We make choices that are directed at each one of those goals. Not every day, all of them, but in general, every week, every month, we want to look back and look at some of the choices we made that make these things more possible, giving love and reaching understanding and so on. Some of these are emotional and some of them are more intellectual. I hope that makes sense. I think Evelyn may have mentioned this earlier, but we have this outline of these points that we've made in terms of mentally healthy people. And if you want to, you can contact Evelyn and request this outline of mentally healthy traits. And this is true of all of our future sessions as well. Each one will have a topic. Our next topic is going to be anxiety and panic attacks. And each one of these topics will have an outline or an article that I might have written or some written information that you can request either before the program or after you've seen the program. Our next one is going to be in 2 weeks on Wednesday, and it will be on anxiety and panic attacks. And I would like it if you send in some questions or send in questions during the program and give some examples of situations that where you've experienced anxiety or maybe panic attacks, because some of these things can be cultural. So the things that I know that people in the United States tend to be anxious about or fearful or panicky may be somewhat different than the very same things in Kenya or from your own cultural background. So in all of our programs, that's one of the things that Evelyn and I are looking forward to, is to hearing your own input in terms of your personal lives, your cultural background, your training from your parents, things like that that can be different from each other. So the next program will be on anxiety and how to deal with it. There's overlap between anxiety and depression. So we'll talk about both. And in some cases, they definitely overlap and they happen in the same person. So we'll talk about ways of dealing with anxiety. And then I think in the next program after that, we are going to talk about happy relationships, intimate relationships that are happy, and what are the elements and what makes them happy, and how to tackle problems in those relationships uh, to repair the times where they're not so happy. So that's a little bit of what we have in mind. I'm not sure. Evelyn dropped off of our program, must have had some technical difficulties, but we'll look into that. So I will say goodbye in a minute, and we really look forward to see you 2 weeks from today, same time, on our next program. So until then, be as healthy as you possibly can, and I look forward to seeing all of you in 2 weeks.
So sorry, guys. I lost my lights, and so sorry to have left you stranded like that. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that next time we'll have better luck with our next program. when it comes to lighting. But yeah, I'm grateful for the little we've covered. Hopefully, we'll meet the Wednesday after next week, and hopefully we will be able to complete this topic. And at the end of the um at the end of the day, we should be grateful for everything, regardless of what you can control. Yeah, so thank you guys for watching. Thank you for tuning in. I think Dr. Claiborne has left the show, and I hope that we are going to be able to see you next time. I was supposed to tell you guys that the next time we are to discuss um, more about anxiety. Our topic for the next show is going to be about anxiety and panic attacks. And I almost got one today, but I don't know. I'm just grateful to God that nowadays I am taking things as they are, and even if I am not in control of certain things like what has just happened, I am grateful that I am able to actually be calm in such situations. So thank you guys for watching. See you next time. Bye bye.